pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, special meeting on order, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Inger?
Yes.
Commissioner French? Yes. Commissioner Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Coloni?
Yes.
Commissioner McNeil?
Here.
Motion passes unanimously.
Oh, roll call. I thought we were going to do
Was it just the roll call?
Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Inger?
Here.
Commissioner French? Here. Commissioner Garrison?
Here.
Commissioner Coloni?
Here.
Commissioner McNeil?
Yeah.
Almost.
I got it flustered.
Okay. Gary, you up?
Forgive me, I put my comments in writing because they're
Oh.
in 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Well, I thought you meant handwriting.
No. You don't want to read my handwriting. That's an impossible task even for me. Gary Kirkwood, Committee Chairman. In my handout of a couple pages, I have some questions in the comment period. During my 3 minutes, I'm only going to cover the comment period. But hopefully, if you look at the questions, you'll ask some of them during the budget hearing section. I think, first of all, I think backbone project is mandatory for CRW. Keep the south unit from running out of water. The Southport plant has its limits, it can't expand. Intake has its limits, it may expand. But at some point in time, they're gonna shut us off, whether we have a firm contract or not, because they won't have the capacity. And South Fork and Oregon City, because they own, Oregon City and West Lynn, because they own South Fork, have first priority on that water. So finishing the backbone is vital in my view. Secondly, we must complete the first part of the project to finish number 2. Otherwise, if we do run out of water, we run the risk of being taken over by the county for lack of providing any services that are required under the law. When I was on the board years ago, we tried to become a PUD and then we're an authority. And we met with some county commissioners about that because they thought they were initially helpful with that. Turns out though that there was other things there. This was the first informal meeting we had, one of the commissioners said the solution to your problem is to join WES, which is the Water Environmental Services, which is the county's sewer district. As soon as water and sewer get together, the county is then allowed to charge franchise fees. And that adds to the water rates. The city of Portland's been paying, the Water Bureau's been paying $6 million to $10 million or more every year for franchise fees to the city of Portland. And that's on the backbone of the water items. That merger then would result in substantially increased costs, plus when the county takes us over, which could happen if we didn't join WES, if we became financially insolvent, they could also take us over and then join us to WES. So I wanted to point out those 2 items with you. I recommend your legal counsel discuss with you how those 2 things work so that you understand them and the importance of, in my view, figuring out a way financially to finish the backbone, both phases, in a timely manner before we run out of water for the south unit. So that's my testimony and what's in the statement. And then there's questions about the challenges to meet that with the phase 1 problems. Any questions that I hope during the hearing you'll ask at least some of those questions to the presented to help clarify what the need is and how some of the things happen. So, thank you very much.
That's very good.
Thank you. Excuse me. Debbie Noble, please.
My name is Debbie Noble. I live at 16095 South Camellia Court in Oregon City, and I am a ratepayer. My questions relate to the timing of having to pass the supplemental budget so soon. It was just on March 14th that you all voted to have Moss Adams in again and try and sort out what was going on, and I would think it would make more sense to wait till we know the answer to that question, or some of those questions, before we pass the supplemental budget. We'd have a better idea of whether or not that was really the appropriate response to whatever happened. My big concerns still regard the length of time to discover that there were any problems. I was just looking at some of the documents that were given out tonight. The backbone project's overview timeline does say that in early 2009, the updated tracking and reporting shows that actual projected phase one costs were 5.9 million over what was expected. But the budget 101 document was talking about monthly and quarterly financial reporting, and it says one of the steps is to compare the budget to actual and track percentage complete. So I still, and I know there were others at the meeting on March 14th that were surprised that it wouldn't be till January that we would have any indication that there was a problem, especially then since some board members later that evening expressed the opinion that the estimate had been off from the get-go, and that different process should have been used for figuring out the estimates and contingencies. And as you consider whether or not the estimate is the real problem, I would ask that you think about whether or not the rent you charge your tenants has gone up, commensurate with what you think is appropriate increase in cost for the backbone projects, and things like that. Oh, also the financial statements have a letter from the accountants in it, and it says that they are required to determine the reasonableness of any estimates that are significant in the financial statements, and there's never been, as far as I could see in the financial statements, any comment from the auditors that the estimates were unreasonable. Oh.
Thank you. Proceeding on, motion to open the budget hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Pass.
Commissioner Andrew?
Here, yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Klein?
Yes.
Commissioner McNeil?
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to open up this information for the supplemental budget and this budget hearing. Adam and I will both be sharing some information with you, just to kind of keep everything fresh in your minds as to why we're here and what we're asking for. So this presentation is going to include a brief overview of the backbone projects, the current financial recap, our design bid build policy and process, project planning, prioritization, and then we'll do an overview of the supplemental budget that we're asking for this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
All
okay.
right. Good evening, Commissioners, again. Just wanted to start out for the benefit of everybody in the room, just some of the history associated with backbone, so forgive me if some of this is known to most of you or many of you, but just wanted to trace it back to starting things out 2014. We staff were directed by the board to begin developing solutions for the goal of serving the South Service area customers. And of course, we had some, CRW had collectively some key goals in mind, as you know, using our available capacity of the plant, getting to the south side, getting to those customers in the south, reducing our dependence on South Fork water, improving fire flows and pumping efficiencies, and creating a new primary resilient supply across the Clackamas River. As you know, a lot of that south infrastructure is dated, old pipes, it's past its useful life, and we saw a great opportunity to beat that up. So, November 2015, we worked with within our internal staff and our bonding consultants to develop a concept plan for phases 1 and 2. That again was conceptual. It got us to the point where we were able to have these conceptual scopes and estimates that then rolled into the bond package process. And that bonding was applied for and acquired in March of 2016 for phase 1 for those first 7 projects. And again, that was based on those estimates of 2015, which the best available information that we had at the time. So we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. August 2016, just to indicate that work began officially, not design necessarily. We were designing work before that, but the first project, the Butterfield Lane project, was awarded by the board, and work began in August of 2016. And then just to move along a little bit, 2018 is when, as you know, we initiated activity in the water system master plan, essentially substantially complete. The board saw the draft of that in October. We passed it on to OHA for their comment, and we anticipate having that to the board for final review and approval this spring. And then, as was noted in the end of February, early 2019, our updated tracking and reporting work that we had done showed that we had actual costs, actual projected costs for completing the phase 1 work were significantly more than what we had bonded for in again, 2016. So, good throw. So, all right. The next slide is again the map we're all familiar with on the wall there. These are the first 7 projects. This is phase 1, starting with the Butterfield Lane project. We have the Carver Spring Water Transmission Main. We have the 2 reservoir jobs, 152nd and Redland Reservoir, Highway 224 Intertie, Patton Pump Station, and Patton Transmission Main, all of which provide storage and capacity to serve a great part of our southern service area. So again, to recap, again, going back to February 28th at the work session, we gave a substantial presentation at that point. And because we're in the budget hearing right now, my goal is not to recap all that right now, but really just to get the high points. So the $5.9 million shortfall is what was identified. And it exists for several reasons. One of those is that the 2015 estimates did not take into account sufficient contingencies for those planning level types of estimates for these types of projects. On the 28th of February, I talked about different levels of contingency that we utilize for different types of projects. And if you recall, there are different degrees of estimates that we may use for a water main job versus more specialty work, at least specialty to CRW for reservoirs or pump stations. For those estimates, we, in 2015, for whatever reason, we did not utilize the degree of contingency that we normally would have.
I have a question.
Yes.
If the contingency wasn't big enough, when you went for the bond, wouldn't the bond agency have said, you know, this contingency isn't big enough? I'm just wondering what happened with that.
I can
Go ahead,
address
Carol.
that. When we presented to the rating agencies and then submitted our official statement for the bonds, we didn't really go into that much detail. The bonds are a little bit more general in that we will spend money to add infrastructure that would allow us to move water from the plant to the south side. It didn't have that many specifics. as far as dollar amounts or of this dollar amount, how much of that is contingency?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, another item is that those estimates do not take into account annual inflation. As we know, that's an important factor for multi-year projects. You know, if we're doing a 1 year, 2 year budget and we're designing and building a project within that year or 2 years, inflation is going to have as much of an effect. But again, we look at more specialized projects, at least for CRW, and a longer 3-4 year window, and looking at the construction market and what it's done in the last few years, we definitely see an impact by inflation.
Somewhat back today, inflation in 2016 was 2%, less than 2%. Inflation in 17, again, less than 2%. Inflation in 18 was almost 4%. So where's the rest of it? Come on,
So,
there's gotta be more than inflation here.
so again, I'm not pointing to just inflation, I'm listing a number of.
That's the only thing
number of
I've heard,
items.
so I'm
Yeah.
just,
Contingencies is a big one, okay? And like we talked about on the 28th, that was a very primary part of the issue.
And the CPI is different than like the engineering news record, which the construction inflation has actually been higher, particularly in 2017-18. Was significantly higher because, for one thing, there's lots more construction going on now. So it tightens up that market.
I haven't looked at steel. Steel didn't go up in 17, it did go up in 18 after the tariff. But we were more than halfway through our project. I don't know, there's gotta be something more than inflation here. I mean, it was.
Oh, absolutely.
Was it consulting? Is that what nailed us here?
That was part of it.
I mean, that's why I wish we had the information from our auditor, you know. We're really scrambling to figure out the real story here, and so we can tell the ratepayers what's going on.
We added the Carver Bridge piece to the use of bond proceeds, which was not included in the original estimate, so that was a significant piece of it. But the Carver Bridge is a linchpin.
But we sold part of the tank to Simmons,
Yes, we did.
True.
which was more than what we were gonna pay for the Carver Bridge.
True. 152nd, that's a good example. That's another one where, you know, just sheer estimates versus what actual was, you know, that construction alone on that job, we did at 11.2 million. That entire project budget, you know, not just construction, you gotta remember
It's the whole
engineering,
thing, oh yeah.
everything was 10 million. So just construction alone, you have, you know, you're looking at I think we had about an 8.8 million maybe in there for a construction budget when we went back in 2015, and that construction only number. So you see higher costs.
So your estimates that were on the bid were wrong?
No, not on
No.
the bid, no. And again, that was part of the presentation on the 28th, but we shared where, looking at the estimates we did, final design pre-bid, right? So design is complete, and remember, all these projects were designed and bid at different times. They were not done all at once, they were done as a phased group of projects. But with the final design, when we did our engineers' estimates, at that point in time, we had, you know, good recent data. In some cases, we were utilizing consultants to help us with those estimates based on the fact that they were assisting with the design. And those all, I think apart from maybe 1 or 2 of the 7 projects, all of those estimates we were under.
Yeah.
The bids came in under
Yeah.
those engineers.
One of them we were over.
Yeah,
Yes.
yep, I think it was your station. Yep. Okay, general design assumptions, speaking of design, and this really, in some respects, relates to contingency as well. You know, when we have more of a feel on, say, a water main job, where we have a lot of good historic data, it's an area of design that we know, we're gonna do X number of feet of pipe, at such and such a diameter, over such and such a terrain. We have a pretty good feel based on the fact that we put a lot of water main in the ground, of where that's gonna land cost-wise. For the more complex projects, like the reservoirs and pump stations, we have less degree of certainty, so again, that's where we would normally want to put in higher contingencies. But to Commissioner McNeil, to your previous question, there were a few things that we added as part of this work, as opportunity work and as necessary work, as part of the phase one backbone. And that included additional scope, you know, adding the Carver Bridge portion, we know the issues surrounding that project historically. And certainly the linchpin north to south and adding it done. We combined it with the Springwater main project, did those together and built them together for some fun. Doing the Redland Reservoir number 2 retrofits. We didn't do it now, we'd have to come back later at probably a greater cost, mobilizing a contractor all new. That's a 45-year-old reservoir that needs significant seismic and other retrofits to make it last another 30, 40 years. So while we're building Reservoir 3, and that's an opportunity to go and do that. Some of the permitting requirements that we came across, while anticipated, were definitely not to the degree that we would normally expect. The hydraulic needs that were identified in the 2018 master plan, we talked about this too. That resulted in some areas where we did upsize. Fortunately, during design, this didn't come after the fact in construction where we had to issue change orders. No, this came during design where we were able to capture it then. We upsized, a good example is the Highway 224 main. We upsized from an 18-inch to a 20-inch diameter main. The Hatton pump station, we upsized those pumps physically to provide more flow, to get water draw it from 152nd, pump it up the hill to Redland. So again, a number of items that really, you know, if you talk about what were the reasons why the cost higher, contingency is huge. Okay, I think I know I shared this in the 28th, that class 4 level contingency, you know, you're really up there 50%, 60% even. These are planning level estimates where you're taking your base cost and you're adding another 50, 60, even 70% in some cases to these projects. Not the 20 to 30% that we would add, you know, with these greater degree of certainty projects like a water main job that we have a lot more historic and knowledge on. So
I have another question. Oh, go ahead, you can ask a question.
What were the contingency percentages that were added for the phase 1 project when it was initially put forth?
So yes, so the 2015 estimates, right, that was the initial estimates. Those were the estimates that the bonds were based on. Those estimates were, without looking at the numbers, I believe we're in the neighborhood of 20 to 30% on those projects. And again, that's not far off the mark, what we would normally see in like our annual or now we're biennial budgets, right? When we present the CIP projects to you in a couple months, or in the budgets, you're gonna see contingencies in that realm of 20 to 30% when you add up construction contingency, you know, overhead, internal, all these things combined to a contingency in that range.
By that, you mean the contingencies for the water lines you've been replacing were in the 20% neighborhood?
Historically, yes, for our
But pump
budgeted
stations
CIPs.
and reservoirs are closer to 80%,
Not that high, no.
but 60 perhaps?
Perhaps, yeah, 50, 60, 70%, you're gonna see that.
Okay, so you were that far off the mark,
Correct.
or those estimates were that far off
Correct.
the mark?
Yeah, if you
didn't
look at,
personally prepare those.
yeah,
I did not.
if you look at the estimating standards in different classes and stuff for this type of project, it's about 75% is what the industry.
Okay, thank you.
So I have another question.
Sure.
Were there things where there was an opportunity to improve things? Were those things, if we had waited down the road, been part of the CIP budgets, do you think?
To some degree, yes, it
Okay.
would have. Yeah, some of those items, you know, a good example is the inlet and outlet mains for the 152nd reservoir. You know, when we looked at that project in 2015, we saw, okay, we have an 18-inch pipe coming up to that site. We've owned that property for 30 years. There's a pipe that feeds off of the main up to the Sunrise pump station. That's where they take their 2.5 MGD million a day from us. So we knew that we were going to build a reservoir in that site. We knew we had a main to get us water up to that point. But when we did the modeling and the design, again, down the line, 2018 really is when we did that work, long after the estimates were done, we realized that that single 18-inch main was no way going to get us the water and Sunrise the water that we needed to deliver out of that reservoir. So thus we had to upgrade, build 2 new mains two 36-inch mains coming from the reservoir, and then a dedicated 24-inch main down Wayne Way and 152nd to get us to the Rock Creek Junction to send water south. So that's a significant cost.
So you were here when Bob was standing right there, pointing at that map, and we were having this conversation. And I said, is 18 big enough? Absolutely. It's not, well, not a problem, that 18-inch line, that'll do it for 25 or 30 years. We don't need anything more than he said right there. And I said, really? 6 months ago, I asked you, is the 12-inch line going up the hill from Henry C., from the Beaver Lake pump station big enough? You said, yeah, it's big enough. I'm going, I don't know whether it's true now or not. I don't know what to believe. Guys, I'm just scrambling.
Okay.
I mean, if I asked the contractor to build me a house and I had a 50% contingency on a house, I'd say I'd find a new contractor. No, I'm going someplace else, thank you. Give me a number.
Yeah, so something to keep in mind is that with the master plan, we did have some updates there. We didn't see these numbers until the master plan was well along its way. I don't want to put all the pressure on the master plan. 152nd, we did not have sunrise demands back in 2015. We had no clue what their demands were going to be. We didn't even know they were going to be interested in, really, I mean, they had not committed to partnering with us at that point in time.
Which has been a problem for a long time.
Sure.
Yes.
But again, I don't want to lay it all on Sunrise's shoulders. I mean, this is a multifaceted issue, and I'm trying to lay out, there are a number of things that led to this costing more.
I'm trying to figure out how you ever have any confidence in the numbers as an elected official. It's really hard. I mean, you're asking us to vote, to approve your work. And I'm going, I'll never know.
Yeah, there's a fundamental issue with, when you're looking at initial cost estimates, this is why there's different levels of planning estimates.
Yeah, right.
This is why you have larger contingencies when you're at that early design or early conceptual planning stage. And how when we actually design a project, we bring in those contingencies so we're a lot closer, and then we ultimately go to bid and get the numbers. And so the idea is as you go along the process, the numbers get more firm. The challenge is if you start off with numbers that don't give you that adequate amount of flexibility, then that's where you can create a problem for yourself later on.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So I mean, it's hard to design a project in 2015, or it's hard to conceptually tell somebody what the project's going to cost in 2015 and be right on and beyond.
Oh, I agree. But not 80, not 70%.
That's the industry standards. That's what's used in all sorts of different projects.
Wow. I can tell you none that I've been involved
Yeah, that's what we use in the master plan.
in. Yeah. I can tell you, in the county, if we had told the commissioners that we needed a 70% contingency, they'd go back to the office.
If you're working on conceptual number, all we're sharing is stuff that's from the AAC.
Yeah.
These are the folks that do the cost estimating all the time.
We also have some hiccups with the county, correct? They kind of said, well, that's fine, and then, oh, you know what, you gotta change things,
Yeah.
correct? And that created a problem
Right.
also.
Yeah, that permitting item, that's
Yeah.
a couple words that captures a lot of design challenges that we have.
Because we had to move like a reservoir 30 feet and things like that.
We did have to move a reservoir because of a fire break requirement, and we argued that back and forth, and they wouldn't budge, and so we had to design and construct something that, in the end, cost us more because of that. Okay. All right, so I wanted to take a step back and just for a couple slides and walk through the processes that we apply at CRW for really any project. And this is not just specific to the backbone, but really any CIP. So really starting at the planning and pre-design level, we again, looking at high-level planning, budgetary estimates with contingencies. Again, those are going to vary depending on the scope of work. kind of walked through this a little already, I think, but when we have recent similar work, and again, I'm gonna focus on water main jobs, we have good data, we know what it takes to go pipe in the ground, we're gonna have a pretty good degree of familiarity and certainty about those estimates. So we're gonna use a lower contingency. For the more complex stuff, more contingency. In the design, that includes a lot of work, a lot of effort. It's not just getting a stamp plan at the end of it. There's a lot that goes into that, as you probably know. We usually start with the survey, do the topographical survey, so we know what the lay of the land is, we know what utilities are in the way, what other conflicts are out there that we have to design around. So we can eliminate some of those surprises in construction. So we align a layout, a water main, or a facility layout. We may get easements if they're needed. We'll walk through the permitting process. Sometimes that's just as simple as a road right-of-way permit with the county. Sometimes it's a more complex, like a conditional use or land use process with the county that takes months versus weeks. In the end, we get a final stamp design that we either stamp in-house, or if it's, again, specialty work, we'll farm that out. Have the expertise of a consultant who does that stuff a lot more often. Complete that type of work. Yes, that does come with a greater cost. But again, they're going to be versed in codes and requirements structurally or whatever to complete a specific design. And it's going to meet jurisdictional and OHA requirements, whether we design it in-house or it's outsourced. It's going to meet not only CRW's requirements, but it's going to meet any state, local, and or health authority requirements for a water facility. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do a final estimate of probable cost that is based on that final design. So we have hard quantities, again, to the best of the final design. It's not saying it's perfect, but it's a lot better than back in the early pre-design phase when we just were conceptual. So again, that's why we land those bids, typically land in that, under that engineer estimate, pre-bid final design. And then as far as bidding goes, we follow ORS 279 and our own local contract review board rules, which align pretty closely with the ORS's. That does include public advertisement, competitive bidding, and award to the lowest responsive bidder.
Responsible bidder.
Responsible, thank you. Responsive or responsible? It's
Both.
responsible. I'm not gonna argue with you, Craig. Yeah. Yeah, point is, we go through a competitive process. Our rules allow us, based on the estimated value of work, to follow either, typically for CIP, it's gonna be the intermediate or upper range, where the process is a little bit different, but it's a public process, and we award competitively. For specialty procurements, such as engineering service contracts, we don't have to go through that bid process, but we do go through a QBS or qualification-based selection process, where we solicit for a service, we get responses, we evaluate those responses based on their capabilities. We don't look at price, we evaluate them strictly based on capabilities. Once we reach an intent to award, then we negotiate a scope and fee with the intended firm.
Do you think the board should see that?
You do.
The price? I never saw a price from a consultant.
When we have you award a contract, whether it's through PBS or construction contract, you see the bid tallies, you see price.
Yeah, from the contractors.
No, no,
Wouldn't that be good?
on the engineering services and all that.
And do they get awarded more than that amount of money?
The award is what the board approves for the award.
And it never changed?
If there's a change, that would be a change order, and then we'd come back to the board for a change. As long
Did
as
that
it's,
happen?
pardon?
Did that happen?
For these projects, there have been changes, yes, but we follow whether it's within Todd's authority to approve or the board's authority.
There you go.
We come back to the board either way to either get your approval or to inform you that a change is imminent.
Thank you.
And again, my final point there, board review and approval of all contracts, June authority is required. How do we plan our projects? This is a little cartoon that just kind of walks you through a cycle of sorts. We shared this with the budget committee the last couple of times through the budgets. Really, you start at the top, we're identifying needs and deficiencies. That identification comes through several different routes every time we do this. The master plan is part of that, but the master plan is not, it's not set in stone. It's not a static document. It changes as system needs change. Other things that can affect our deficiencies, priorities, and listing is external mandates. You know, we have a lot of work that highway departments are doing, the county's doing, ODOT's doing, that we have to respond to in some way, shape, or form. Some of those we don't know about. Maybe a year in advance is oftentimes good notice. Sometimes we know less in less time than that. And also if we have unforeseen things come up, maybe we have a major leak or a series of leaks along a main that for the last 20 years has been quiet. You know, how do we respond to that? Whether we have to get it on the list and fix it. So going around the cycle, we have a list of needs. We have a number of selection criteria to help us prioritize how we might rank these or get them into a list for a budgetary consideration. A number of those things, I mentioned outside agencies. If there's a modeling reason, if the hydraulics of that part of the system dictate, you know, we may be looking at, hey, this should be a 12-inch line, and it's an 8 in dump size. Leak history, certainly the condition of the line, the age, those all weigh into prioritizing projects. We all know that, I think we've all seen the EASC reports, AWWA reports about buried infrastructure and how the nation is as a whole. You know, we tend to put things in the ground and forget about them. Yes, they should last 50 to 100 years or longer, but we can't forget about them. We have to preventively maintain, we have to budget accordingly and do planned replacements so that we can tackle these things over time and not have it all hit us at once. So again, we get to a proposed annual projects list, that works in the bottom of the graphic there into essentially our annual, really it's our biannual budget. If we have multi-year projects, those are communicated as such through the budget process. If they don't get picked, if a project is stuck and doesn't make the list, it doesn't go away. It stays in the rotation. It might come up a couple years from now. We push it forward, recommend it. Okay. All right, to wrap up my piece, just a few bullet points that we shared similarly on the 28th. We are on track to complete phase 1. We know we have some need that was greater than what we originally estimated, but we are on track to complete the phase 1 projects. It's going to provide all the benefits that we had intended it to provide, the goals that we had set forth when when the board directed us to move forward with the backbone. And as Carol will share, we are in a good financial position with enough reserve funds to complete the projects on time and with the approval of the supplemental budget, which is what we're asking for tonight. Okay.
Thanks, Adam. Does anybody have any other questions for Adam before I move on to kind of the technical supplemental budget part?
I think I'll save my question for the supplemental budget.
Okay. So, what I'm sharing here is the revenue bond proceeds fund. And the initial budget for the biennium had us with a beginning balance of $19,100,000 available bond proceeds to spend. And one thing I'd like to remind the board is we did get some excess funding with our bonds. We got a pretty hefty bond premium. We actually borrowed $19,790,000, but we received in proceeds $23.3 million. So when we're paying back, we're only paying back the $19,790 plus interest, but you know the bond premium has certainly helped us. And then we anticipated non-operating resources, which is interest earned on the funds of $146,000, at the time that we did the budget, the interest rate on the local government investment pool was about 0.6, and it's currently a little higher than 2.5, I believe. And then we anticipated transferring to the bond construction fund $17,292,000, leaving us a balance of $2 million of bond proceeds in anticipation of completing the projects in the next biennium. So when I looked at the actuals from 2017 that rolled into the budget, remember we didn't have those actuals when we were creating the budget. We actually had more money in our beginning fund balance, and then we earned greater amounts of interest than we had forecast. Again, the interest rates were going up. And so if you leave the requirements, the transfers the same, we will end up with an unappropriated and reserved balance in the revenue bond proceeds fund of almost $3.5 million. And so that provides us with sufficient funding out of bond proceeds to get us to the end of this fiscal year without exceeding an appropriation. So the existing appropriation in the bond construction fund was 20.2, and part of that was a contribution from the capital reserve fund of $3 million. So the supplemental budget that I'm requesting this evening will add $3 million coming from the revenue bond proceeds ending fund balance. So we're not taking money from any other funds or any other reserves. We have that much in the ending fund balance of the revenue bond proceeds. So I'm looking at our spending to date through all of fiscal 18 and fiscal 19 through February. We've spent 15.5. So we have not exceeded our appropriations at this point. We still have $4.7 million available to spend. And as I said, I'm asking for, let me jump this in. So here's showing you exactly the expenditures to date from the beginning of the project. So fiscal 16, we only got the money in March. We were doing some design and planning work through June 30th, so that first year we didn't spend very much. In fiscal 17, continuing to do design work, we also built a Butterfield transmission main, and then in fiscal 18, we started really getting going on some of these other projects, including 152nd, but everything is really, everything's in line and churning right along. Fiscal 19, just through February, we've spent $9.5 million.
Todd, can I get that? I don't have it in here. I don't have those numbers.
It should be on,
On slide,
yeah, slide 13. It's right before the green sheet,
Before the green.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we get to the budgetary year. Why am I here? Our beginning fund balance and capital reserve, we've got our appropriations, what we spent in last fiscal year. Our remaining appropriation in the biennial budget is $14 million, but we think we're gonna need $16,500,000 to get us to the end of the year. So we need an additional appropriation of $2.4 million. What I'm asking for is an additional appropriation of $3 million that will easily come out of our bond proceeds that we still have remaining that we have not yet appropriated. So the process to do this is we're going to increase the beginning fund balance of the revenue bond proceeds. We're going to increase the transfer from what we had originally appropriated, the 17.3. We're going to add an additional $3 million, and we're going to decrease the ending fund balance by $2 million. And in the CIP bond construction, we're asking for transfers in, that's the resource side, from the revenue bond proceeds, and then we're asking to increase the capital outlay by $3 million. $3 million is likely more than we need to get to the end of the fiscal year. We believe that we need 2.4, but we get some really good weather, some of the projects get a little ahead of schedule. I don't want to run short and have to come back again. So we asked for the $3 million, and anything that's left will be available. And in fact, we're going to have a proposed budget in a couple of weeks, and it's going to include the amount that we believe we need for the next biennium.
To finish the project.
get to
Right.
finish phase one, yeah. So here's what the supplemental budget looks like. Both funds that we're touching, the revenue bond proceeds fund and the CIP bond construction fund, have to be balanced. And so here's kind of a picture of what I've just described. And then if you look at revised totals of the total budget, so if you compare these numbers to what is in your budget document, this is what they will look like when they're done. And again, the revenue bond proceeds, the revised resources and revised requirements are still in balance, and the revised resources and requirement for the CIP bond construction fund are also in balance. So that's my presentation. Again, completing all of these projects, we will be able to move water from our treatment plant to customers of ours on the south side of the service area, which was our goal in the first place. And all of the projects are providing us value, and some are actually providing greater value than what we anticipated when we first began these discussions in 2015.
Well, last time I got in trouble for a reason.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna try to put this, Mickey Mouse big word language. We have the funds in our pocketbook. But you gotta move it from this one to this one and that one to that one and back to that, I get that. That will take care of the problem we have that came up. Now, I mean, I have a concern as to why it took so long. I can kind of understand, because it seemed like every time there was a hiccup somewhere, there was something, and prices go up, things change. I get all that. I think the big thing right now is, okay, we can fix this, still have money left over, we're in good shape, and we're not raising rates due to this. Okay. Going forward, Carol, what safeguards? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about it, or what we can do and use. I mean, I understand the contingency part. I mean, you can do 100% contingency, there's no guarantee that's gonna be enough, you know.
Well, when you run in, I mean, you have a contingency, and let's say we borrowed more than we needed, then we would have challenges in spending those funds within.
Because we have to
within
spend
our
85%?
5%
Of our
within
bond.
a 3-year grace period.
Right.
85% of the bond proceeds. And that's not, like I said, the 19 million that we borrowed, it's not 85% of that. It's 85% of what we received, the 23.3%. And that challenges us, you know, as far as staffing and capacity and everything else. So, but certainly I would say, hopefully have maybe a little bit better idea of the design components. And I think we've already started spending some money on some of the phase 2 to kind of help us get there. So we know a little bit more about what it is that we will need to build for phase 2, so we'll have better estimates. And then my proposal is, every time we ask the board to approve a contract, we'll start with, this was our estimate that we used to acquire the bonds. This is what the contract is, and then you can see the difference on each of those, so that you will know before we get to the, oops, we issued all the contracts and it's greater than our funding.
One point of clarification though is what we're asking tonight only deals with this fiscal year. or
Right,
just the
right,
remainder.
Yes.
So
So, yeah, I
in the
get that.
next budget, that will be for the remainder of that, so. And then the value of having, considering the supplemental budget now versus later
Yeah,
is
that's right.
we're spending money.
Right.
And so we wanna make sure we've been fine so far, but we don't wanna run into that situation where, we're not gonna have the appropriation to complete up this year.
At this point, we have not exceeded any appropriations. I'm asking for the supplemental budget to ensure that we get to June 30th without that happening.
So I had a question. It had to do with a question that one of the public brought up, which was the audit. How is the audit? Are we gonna be waiting for anything from the audit in terms of spending money? I mean, how is this all going to integrate?
We will have the auditors come in and look at all of the contracts, how they were issued, you know, all of that stuff, and they will provide recommendations to Commissioner French's question about how we can improve our reporting and information that we share with the board and with the public.
But we need the supplemental budget now before this audit is done, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank
We
you.
gotta pay the bills.
Yeah, I can't
Gotta
wait
pay
till
the
next
bills.
one.
Yeah.
Gotta pay the bills.
Well, a member of the public brought that up, so I wanted to
Yeah.
get it.
Well, it's a good point. No, it's a very
Yeah.
good point. It just, we're pretty rock and hard spot.
I had a question about the audit that's coming up. You know, originally I'd asked for apparently, by asking for the type of audit that I had asked for was criminal investigation. I looked that up and I couldn't find it designated as that sort of a thing, but regardless, because I went ahead and proved this, what we have coming. What I think I'd like to, if the rest of the committee would like to, meet with whoever is going to do this audit, either shortly after they start or before they start, to kind of get an idea of what's going on and how they're going to deal with it, and to develop some sort of program so this doesn't happen again. This is one of the more embarrassing things I've gone through in various public lives, and I sure would hate to have it happen again. And so how do we prevent that? What sort of guardians do we set up? Excuse me, it seems to me that they should have that in their work.
So let me first answer the question about the why this is not a forensic audit. That was I requested that specifically from the auditor, of what that means in their world, and they provided a definition of that, and that's the definition I shared at the last meeting. So they're doing a program review instead, which I think accomplishes the goals that you set out, to review the program, figure out what happened, figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That third point of yours is a key factor for me as well.
So my understanding is that the work has begun or is about to begin, and so
That's good to know.
if the board wants to have a meeting with the auditor in advance of the work starting, then I think we'd have to stop the auditor from moving forward, because I think they will start that work before your next meeting.
And I would comment that until they look at our process, they're not going to have an answer of how do we keep this from happening again. But when they go through the audit and the examination of the entire process, that's when they'll know the answer to that question, and they will provide recommendations.
I
So
think
they
you
don't.
missed the point. The point here is, the board, the reason we voted for that is that it is about the board. This isn't about your side, this is to make the board feel better. I think the board needs to have a meeting with the auditor so they can hear from us what we're looking for. Then they can go do their thing and bring back and says, well, this is what we found. Here's the answers to your question.
I think that Carol's more than competent enough to tell explain to the auditors what it is that we're looking for. We just, it happened, why, and what can we do not to have it happen in the future? Kind of what it boils down to, so it doesn't happen again. And then we take that, once we have that audit in hand, then if we have questions, yes, have them come, and then we can answer or maybe get further information or direction. But it's not just for the board, I think it's for everybody. It's not just the audit for the 5 of us, it's for staff and ratepayers, transparency and being truthful And so I would say, you know, I mean, I have full confidence in Carol and Todd, you know, talking to the auditors and saying, okay, this is what the board has, these are our concerns. And then, you know, so, and give them the, you know, that information, and then when we have the audit, then have them come, and then if we have questions and then we can get our answers.
I would like to, as I said before,
Mhm.
if you wouldn't care to attend, or anybody else, I personally would like to attend a meeting with the auditor. I would like to get their work program, to see what they're going to do, what they have in mind, and to develop, based on that, with them, develop a program where it won't happen again. I don't know about you, but this is terribly embarrassing to have this go on.
So if I can offer, can we get some clarification from the auditors? We'll follow up with them on that. I'm actually, for some reason, under the impression that that's actually part of the plan, is to talk to you about that.
Yeah,
Okay, I'd like to have that from
But
them.
before let me
Yeah,
get some clarification, because that's not in their scope.
Right.
That wasn't listed in their scope, so let me get some clarification from them. So we'll follow up with them and express that.
Thank you.
Let me know, you.
Will do.
So I guess, I think that all the things that you added to the project, the ratepayers will get a benefit from. I believe that. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit bigger. I just think the board should have known a hell of a long time. And if you want to make changes, this board has always supported you. God, just give us the information. Don't do it this way, please. So my last question is, in light of what Portland is going through with their 30-inch main break, any water district can have that problem. Any. That's just the business we're in. And that's the dice that we roll every friggin' day of every minute, you know, it's just, hell, it could be a reservoir, you know, I was around when they were building I-205 and the reservoir for West Wind started sliding down the friggin' hill. I mean, there was all hands on deck, and it was prop that damn thing up and get that thing to quit moving. I mean, tilted, it's still tilted today, you know, but they got it to stop moving, you know, and so, I guess my question, Carol, is, in the phase 2 bonding, this spending money from the checkbook was clearly not what we wanted to do. We want these giant projects that last 80 or 100 years to get paid for by people 80 years from now. I don't want to pay for this whole damn thing, right? Is there any way we can get this money back? We can't move bond dollars to this, I clearly understand that, but we can put other things in the bond that kind of help make this right?
So every time you do a project, every time you go for bond funding, there's a balance, right? How much debt service payment can the district afford?
Yeah, right.
But-
Who do we qualify?
But yes, when we go out for phase 2, we can look at the projects that are currently on the list, or if there's some design change, you know, based on the water system master plan, we may look at something a little different than what's on the list
Absolutely.
right now. And if we have the capacity to borrow more, we can borrow for other CIP projects, which would provide funding from bond funds instead of from our capital reserve that comes from ratepayer money.
I mean, knowing that we have bad pipes in some parts of the district, we have to have, I mean, when they got here, we had no checkbook. I mean, we were shot in the head. I mean, it was ugly. I don't know how you shut up every day. How we could pay these bills, you know? But we've done a good job of getting that built up, and to spend it for this is not what we intended to do. There's not at all. And so we need to reconcile that somehow. And so that's, can't fix where we are, but I think going forward, hopefully we can.
We will get another 1.5 million or thereabouts. We'll do a true up before we get the third payment from Sunrise, and that will go into capital reserve. So that will
It helps.
pay back a portion. And like I said, you've always got to balance it. Our capacity to borrow is based on the rates that we charge as well. And because of work capacity, it might be better to borrow a slightly smaller amount and then a couple of years, 2-3 years down the road, borrow again. And again, we can look at any and all capital projects that are on our list, and we can use bond funds for those.
Any other?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned that we will be going into capital reserves at some point in the phase 1 and phase 2. And the district is prudent in putting aside capital reserves, but they're also used for capital improvement. How is our net reserves and our capital improvement project spending going to be impacted by this? Is it gonna stay the same? Are we gonna drop down?
We will be able to accomplish the CIP projects that we want. We're still kind of putting the budget together, but we have sufficient money going into capital reserve from the general fund and to be able to pay for the regular CIP projects.
On the same
And-
scale as we have in the past?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So we might be earning just a little bit less interest because that reserve balance will go down, but it'll go back up again.
Okay, thank you.
Any other?
Move to close budget hearing?
However,
Oh, no. Is there something
you
else?
want to give the public
Oh,
an
yes, sorry.
opportunity to add anything?
Oh, yeah.
You want to give the public an
Yes.
opportunity to
Oh,
provide
Follow the
testimony?
agenda. Just gotta follow that.
Anybody?
Okay, any questions, any?
Yeah, I have some follow-up questions for Adam, I think your name was, or whoever.
Comments?
No, I'm good, right here's it.
Commissioner,
Microphone.
Commissioner Kalani.
Yeah, they don't want
So it's time for public comment for people to address the board with comments about the
Right.
supplemental budget,
Right.
since we're in the budget hearing, so.
All right, that's fine.
And we do have our meeting tomorrow that we
Right.
can go through more detailed questions.
So am I okay here now?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Again, it's Debbie Noble, 16095 South Community Court, Oregon City, and I am a ratepayer. Some of the items that Adam brought up when he was presenting the explanation for the increase in the cost were that the 2015 estimates did not take into account sufficient industry standard contingencies. When did we know that they didn't? Anyway.
I would say, when we developed the master plan this last year, those estimates for those projects were utilizing the AACE, which is a national standard for the contingencies I mentioned, the range of those contingencies. So at that period of time, we were becoming more aware of where the project should have landed, but really it wasn't until early this year when we actually went back and did the tracking and the work that we should have done, admittedly, much sooner, where the conclusion was reached that those contingencies in the 2015 estimates were low.
So you didn't know till early this year? Okay. And then another explanation was the addition of the Carver Bridge project, I believe you said? When did we know about the Carver Bridge project?
That project there's a lot of history there, and I won't get into that.
But when did we
It
know?
was budgeted as in the current fiscal period, 17-19 biennium, it was budgeted in our CIP fund. So that was a known project, budgeted in the normal CIPs. It was determined to enable us to utilize more of the backbone funds and help us reach our 85% spend goal quicker, to assign that project cost to the bonded fund.
And then there was something about an 18-inch main not being big enough, something to do with Sunrise. When did we know we were changing that?
That was done as part of the design of the 152nd project, so a year and a half ago, I would say.
I guess my point here being that it sounds like a lot of the things that caused the overage were known about long before February, when you guys were informed that you were actually over, which has been a problem I haven't understood. Why, it sounds like the board wasn't regarded in the manner that they should have been in terms of approving the projects and the contracts. And it certainly appears as though the accountants were not advised, and that there was knowledge that they were over budget prior to the issuance of the financial statements and the end of field work. And that concerns me, because that's my understanding of that situation, is that they're supposed to know if there's knowledge before they leave the field and issue the financial statements. Thank you.
Gary, I'm on there too.
Okay.
Fine? Couple good questions. Tonight, mostly from a budget standpoint, regarding the upcoming budget cycle, that I'd like to see some things in when we get there. We covered tonight half of the 5.9 million. I'm assuming the other 3 million is going to be in the budget. And you'll identify for us how that's going to be funded and where that will take place in the biennium. Also, can't read the notes. In the next biennium, we're supposed to complete most of the second phase. So
Phase one. We'll complete phase one in the next phase.
I understood phase one is going to finish by December this year.
Right, which spills over to the next phase.
Yeah, but when are we going to start phase two? My understanding was that phase two was going to start in late 19 or early 20. Okay, so anyway, how that's going to work, and Carol covered part of that tonight. I would like to know for the budget, the impact that this lack of the $3 million will have on the CIP and the identification during those budget hearings or meetings of which projects can be bonded, which ones can't. I'm also concerned that a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, the state was going to redo 82nd Avenue. We were going to redo that line for 4 years. So I don't know where that one stands. That might be something to look into for the next budget. See if we can bond that. If the state's going to do it or not. I know that's postponed again. So I was concerned about that particular one. Now, with regard to the overreach on the 28th you discussed, I noticed particularly that the outside engineers that are doing our supervision and other kind of things, those budgets kind of ballooned much larger than the actual construction budget, as I saw the presentation materials. And normally engineering and other kind of things like accountants is always an hourly basis. So I'm wondering if we got lowballed on the hours they were thinking to spend, and that's why they're one of them doubled. So somewhere I'd like to hear and see what, either from the auditor or from somebody, of why those balloons substantially. I think one started out at 600,000 and now it's $1.4 million or something. That's shooting from memory, and that's a month ago. So my memory's scrambled right now on numbers. So. Okay.
I could comment if you want just to that. Though they didn't balloon. It's a similar story with 2015 estimates being low, but the numbers I think you're referring to, those were for both design costs and construction management inspection costs. So it wasn't we had a contract at such and such a value and it increased double. It was several contracts for that type of
Well,
stuff.
my interpretation of what I saw from the February presentation, and I got a copy of it, was that it was in excess of the bid. And so I was just wondering if the bid was lowball as opposed to being direct. Okay. Now, also a comment on Mr. Kalani's question about the auditors. The auditors always work for the board, so does the outside counsel. And so you can choose what them you want to do. They're your direct contacts. So,
Very good.
okay. Thank you.
questions or statements, input? Then we'll close the budget.
So I
Hearing.
move to, it says to make a motion, so I'm gonna make a motion to close the budget hearing.
Do we, do we have to vote on this?
I
Well,
don't think we need,
No,
You are.
This is the supplemental appropriation.
that's in the rest, in the action items,
Got it?
Oh,
yeah.
it's right here.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, I think we can just, yeah, we can just probably say aye or whatever.
so close the budget hearing.
Sorry.
So you made a motion to close the budget
Yeah.
hearing?
And I
Because-
second.
And a second, okay.
Now call the roll call.
Now,
Commissioner
roll
Andrew?
call.
Commissioner Andrew?
Yes.
Commissioner French?
Yeah.
Commissioner Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Klein?
Yes.
Commissioner McNair?
Yes.